We have a crime time banner on, and we'll get that fixed in just a minute. If you are looking for crime time, you are in the wrong place, because this is our Friday Frontliner. There we go. Welcome to a Mighty Blaze Friday Frontliner interview. My name is Mary Weber O'Malley, and I am on social media as Blurb Your Enthusiasm. I am a virtual bookseller for Skylark Bookshop in Columbia, Missouri, and one of A Mighty Blaze's wonderful blazers. And I love A Mighty Blaze. We are a social media company that started in the age of COVID, connecting readers with authors that their book tours had been canceled. And now we have grown into so much more. We are here almost every day of the week, and we are interviewing authors across all genres. We have thrillers, we have frontliners, we have the thoughtful bro, we have historic books, cookbooks, everything you can think of. And all of our interviews are free. So what we would ask is that to support us, you would go to social media and like us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then jump over to our website and subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss an event. Like today's event that I'm so excited for. We are going to be talking to Susanna Hoffs, and Susanna grew up in LA with an ever-present soundtrack of 60s music. She loved to sing and play guitar, going on to study the arts in college. We all know about the band that was formed, but we also, since then, Susanna has released numerous albums, collaborated with some of the biggest stars in music, TV, and movie industries, appeared in movies, a variety of shows, and now, because she wasn't rounded enough, she has written a book. This Bird Has Flown. So welcome, Susanna, to A Mighty Blaze. We are so happy to have you here. Can we start by having you tell the people watching about your amazing book?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, it was a lifelong dream to write a novel. I've been a reader since I was a girl. My mom always had her nose in a book, and I've inherited a lot of her cool tattered paperbacks. And I had this wonderful time writing songs and being a member of the Bangles. And I had co-written a bunch of screenplays, and many of them were optioned, but found their way onto a shelf. And it was just in that moment where I had just completed one of those in collaboration with a really dear friend that I realized I didn't know if anything would happen with the screenplay. And my son, Jackson, we have two sons, Sam and Jackson. Jackson's the older one. We were all sitting around, and I was kind of bemoaning, not knowing what was going to happen with this collaborative effort that I made on the screenplay. And Jackson just blurted out, "Mom, you've always wanted to write a novel. Why don't you?" And I took a beat and I went, "Yeah, why don't I?" And that just launched me into this joyous zone of focusing on the book, waking up, thinking about it all day long, beginning to write. And it's just been the most bizarrely joyous and fun journey, because I know a lot of writers, complain that it's really hard work. Yes, it is. But I found it so transporting, permission to live in my fantasy world with my fantasy characters. And I don't mean fantasy genre, but
I love everything about that. So for everybody watching, I'm going to chat with Susanna a bit about This Bird Has Flown. And then I will have time to take some of your questions. So if you have a question about the book, if you have a question about the writing process, publication, path to publication, any of those wonderful things, please do put them in the comment section. And as we get time, I will try to get to as many as we can. So I have so many questions, so many. How does, now you mentioned a screenplay,
Yeah.
how does writing songs translate into screenplay and then into the novel writing process?
Well, to me, songwriting is quite different, and in some ways very difficult for me. I usually, when I would I would always co-write. It was something I always did in partnership with my Bangles comrades, and also, you know, through the years with other musicians, because it's you have to really take into account meter and rhythm and rhyme, and it's more like crafting a poem. It's more like trying to make the puzzle pieces fit together. Whereas as a you know, avid reader myself, I can just disappear into the story, and it was a little more freeform in a sense for me. And so I found the novel writing just, again, unexpectedly freeing, and permission to live in my fantasy of this universe. It's not a sci-fi universe. It's a very grounded universe, but my characters would just begin to talk to me. And it sounds like a form of psychosis, but if it is, it's the best version of that. and music would always trigger their conversations, because I like to have music going on. And I always say it's the beginning, middle, and end of every day for me. I'm always in my morning walks, I would have a playlist that would just grow and grow, adding more songs on there. And the minute the songs began to play in my ears, my characters would start behaving. It was as if a movie screen came down, but in my head, and I would see where they were in a room, and I'd see their expressions, and I'd hear what they were saying, and I would take my phone, and I would just, you know, capture it, because I learned the hard way that if you think you have a great idea, 20 minutes later, you're like, what was that great idea? And so that happened a few too many times. And so I developed a practice of having Post-it notes pretty much on every surface of the house with a pen or a pencil beside it. I had my phone. Whenever I got an idea, I would bottle it, so to speak, by texting it to myself or emailing it to myself. Thousands of those emails. And I've begun to do that I've just started to think about another book now that This Bird has flown, it has been released into the world. And so it's happening again. And it's been so fun to meet other writers, because writing is a very solitary process, as you probably know or can imagine. And I love that about it, because I never really felt alone, because I was hanging out with my fictional characters. But at the same time, it is, you know, compared to collaborating in a band and rehearsing and working on arrangements with other people, you do find yourself sitting, in my case, at a little card table with a little tablecloth on it and a monitor, not a fancy desk by any means, but just sitting there and crafting the story and hearing their voices and writing down what they say and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yes. So the evolution was the screenplays that didn't make it. And so your son says, write a book. Was it from the get-go? Was it this book?
Yeah.
Or did you start and stop?
It was this book. You know, Jackson gave me another prompt. We went on a trip to New York, Jackson and Sam, my younger son, and myself, and we were during the week long, we were in New York for their spring break when they were still in high school. And Jackson may have started college by then, but we did this annual theater trip that we loved. And I was badgering him all the time, kind of coming up with the story. And on the plane home, he said, Mom, tomorrow I want you to stop talking about it. You're going to open your computer, you're going to stare at a blank page and just go. And so I followed his edict there, and I did just that. And I wrote a couple of pages, and then I had my parents over just to make sure that I wasn't imagining that this had happened. I wanted to kind of like force myself to really, really do it. And that's how it all began. And so the first page of This Bird Has Flown, as you would pick it up now in a bookstore, is not the same as it was that day several years ago, but the characters just bloomed to life. And once I started to go, it really was like I put on the red shoes and I couldn't stop dancing. It really was. I really did enjoy it so much that, as I said, I'm raring to go on another book.
I love everything about that. I love that your son is pushing you to make this new dream come true. I have two sons and a daughter. My daughter is, she's my biggest cheerleader, and also, get me off that hump and just say, do it, mom. Just do it. Quit talking about it and do it. So it's great to have the encouragement of our children that way.
It really is.
It is. So can you talk to me? You have some amazing settings in this book. You take us a number of different places. Why did those settings work so perfectly here?
Well, I love that question. So in the journey to kind of figure out how to write a novel, I studied books that I had loved as a kid, as a teen, and throughout my life. There were two books in particular that I really learned a lot from. One was Jane Eyre, and the other was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So I started to kind of think about thematic elements of the book. And I liked that in both of those books, for me as a reader, my takeaway was that in both stories, there was sort of, the protagonists were haunted to some degree by this sort of ghosts of the past, either in their own lives or in terms of, ghosts of relationships past. So we know Mr. Rochester has an actual live woman in the attic that, but Jane is haunted by this sense that there's something going on in that house that she can't quite figure out what it is. And she's falling in love with Rochester and he's falling in love with her, but they're haunted by this actual live wife of his, but she appears like a ghost to Jane. And there is the ghost of this failed relationship that he's had with her. And so I was really intrigued with that. In the case of Rebecca, it was a very similar theme. In both books, you have this sort of Gothic setting. So to your question, I decided to set a chunk of my book in Oxford. It turned out Jackson was doing a semester abroad at Oxford. So I started to do these, research field trips, visiting my kid who is away and living in Oxford, UK. And then it was so great because it was right when I was really diving deep with the book. And so I decided that Oxford, the city itself and the University of Oxford, was my Gothic setting in a very modern kind of love story book that also has the protagonist who's a musician. So there's multiple things going on with Jane Start as a character. She's a one-hit wonder that we find 10 years after the one hit. And she's just trying to find her voice again within the music business and just as a human and as an artist. So, and then there's also the love story.
So you just, for somebody who had not written a book before, you nailed so many parts of this so perfectly. Aside from the settings, your characters feel like they were just so intricately crafted and chosen. I write nonfiction. I'm a memoirist. Fiction for me is just unattainable. And the way you manage to bring these characters to life and bring them together, Jane and her brother.
Yeah.
Her brother is seemingly a minor character, but brings so much into the story. So how did you find these characters as you were writing? Were they always kind of there? Did you bring them in later?
No, they started to be integral, sorry, to the whole process. And I don't know what it is. I guess I just have a very active imagination. I'm always an observer of human nature anyway. I love people. So does Jane Stark. She loves people, even people that are troubling or, not, they did misbehaving characters. I love too. I love snobby characters. I mean, Jane encounters so many myriad characters in her kind of fish out of water story. But I watch I consume storytelling in all its forms. And I always have been a movie, like a cinephile kind of person who's like, and I did a lot of research during the years that I was writing the book. I watched every season ever made of this show, Inspector Morse, that is set in Oxford. And it's just a detective show. But the way that the snooty Oxford professors talk, I would be just writing down little clips of things they said. I had piles of Post-it notes and pages. I learned from Inspector Morse. I learned from lots of British shows. I learned from, I don't know what happened. It was fun. The characters just bloomed to life in my mind. As you said, Jane's brother, her parents, her cohort in England. There's so many festive characters that she finds when she immerses herself in the world of Oxford. I loved hanging out with these imaginary friends, and they each had a distinct voice. I don't know why. They just introduced themselves to me. I don't know, but perhaps it was from all the studying of these shows, especially British shows, that helped me to write in the different British styles, the fancy, the posh, and also the more working class British characters who are so wonderful. I mean, there's just a plethora of different kinds of characters in the book, and I love them all equally. They're just so fun to hang out with.
It is absolutely true. There are so many different types of character, which just enriches the storyline so beautifully.
Thank you.
Because I felt like, and I'm an immersive reader. I'm an emotional reader. I'm not a technical reader. So I have friends in the book selling world who will say, well, on page 172, didn't you find? I'm like, no, I can't do that. For me, it's the feeling I get reading a book, and the feeling I got reading this was just joy and pleasure. Like, I really enjoyed knowing all of your characters. And they were, some of them I'd be like, oh my God, that's so annoying. It felt like they were so real. So you did such a beautiful job with that. Were there any characters that started out in your book that you had to let go of?
That's such a good question. There were so many earlier drafts of the book. There was a whole section that when I first I'd spent already a year or so, working on the book. I had a friend who was going through a really hard time, but I hadn't really shared the book with many people. I'd read little paragraph here or that to family members, but she just wanted me to read this. It was a behemoth draft. And as I said, there was a whole third section that she actually, after sitting there, and she just wanted to come over and have me read to her. So it was a great exercise as a writer to read your words and say them aloud, to act out the part, even, me grappling with the British accents, every kind of British accent there was, but I read it to her. And it was like therapeutic for both of us, because I was actually like testing out the book on a reader, and she was like enjoying being read to. And she did make a comment, like this one whole section of the book, she's like, it's great, but it doesn't really fit the rest. And I was like, okay, I have that section and I want to do something with it someday. But you learn so much from reading out loud. And to your mentioning about the different characters, I love writing dialogue. They would write themselves. Pippa is Jane's manager and a British woman, and they're also very close friends. They're back and forth. I could just sit there for days, having them, girl talk about things and help each other and love each other, but sometimes, have to put pressure on each other to make things happen. Their relationship was amazing. Jane and her brother and all the people she encounters on her journey as a fish out of water living in another country. And of course, her relationship with her love interest that was endlessly delish to write. My husband would walk in and go, "You're sitting at the same spot you were 5 hours ago and you're giggling. What's up?" And I'd be like, "Well, my character, the protagonist, is hanging out with her fictional boyfriend, and they're having a really nice time together in bed. So excuse yourself from this room right now so I can continue." It was very fun to write about the first blush of a new romance. I mean, that's a magical time. It's a euphoric time. So I felt euphoric writing that stuff too.
Yes, and it comes through. It absolutely comes through. So can you talk a little bit about your path to publication? Your son has given you, "Mom, you got to write this book. Just sit down and start writing." And now you've announced it to the world. You're going to do it. How was your path to this here today?
Oh, wow. I thank you for asking. So it was several years working on the book, sharing little bits and things with the family. And at a certain point, my really good friend, who's a novelist, said, "Please let me," she basically insisted that I let her have a read of it. And it was all just printed on, paper at this point. I reticently let her pull it out of my hands, my grasp, and she read it extremely quickly. And she said, and I trusted her because she's an excellent novelist. She's like, "You have to get this to a literary agent ASAP." And I was like, "Really?" But she goes, "No, write this version, this exact version as you shared it with me." And so I said, "Well, do you know anybody?" She goes, "Yeah, I think my agent would love it." So on my birthday, it was actually my 60th birthday, my son Jackson again stepped up. It was pouring rain. I was meant to have lunch with my dear friend Belinda Carlisle, who's the lead singer of the Go-Go's, to celebrate my birthday, but also to get together. And Jackson took the manuscript in the rain and FedExed it for me. A couple days later, I heard from Sarah. She was so excited about the book. She loved it, the manuscript, I should say at that point. And she said, "Oh, I happen to be in California. Can we meet?" And I said, "Oh no, I'm recording I was working on an album also simultaneously, and I was booked in the studio and I couldn't meet her." But I quickly organized a trip to New York, and I even dressed in like a little suit to walk to her office from where I was staying. And she took me out to the restaurant where the agents meet with their novelists. And it was so magical. And we had like a 3-hour lunch, and she loved the book, and it went from there. And then for publishing, that I worked on the book a little bit more, did some edits, revisions, because my agent had come from editing and had editing this amazing book called The Lovely Bones. So she was a very experienced editor, because it's such a solo act working on a book, and it's not often that you have a lot of feedback. You're just,
right.
It's not like music where it's so different, where we write a song, collaborate with a friend or one of my bandmates, and you play it, and it's like it takes 3 minutes to play the song. Well, it takes years to write a book. So it's just so different. So having the feedback was extraordinary, and worked on and then a while later, Sarah said, you know what, I think this novel is ready to take to publishers. And that's how it all happened.
I love it. And I mean, it sounds like, oh, it was this fast thing, I just sent it. But no, you spent years working on this book before you felt like, oh, maybe I'll let somebody else see it. I have just a couple more questions. I know we have a few viewer questions. What has been the biggest surprise for you of the publishing journey?
Wow. Well, it was very fast because, there was this period where Sarah, my agent, said, okay, I think this manuscript is ready to be sent. And because she's such a wonderful agent, and it's kind of a small world, the publishing world, compared to what I know from the music business. So she had certain people in mind that she thought would connect, because she knows they all know each other. And that she warned me, there's going to be a week where you're not going to hear anything, because that's when the editors are reading the books. And, I said, okay, great. I'll maintain my cool. About 3 days into that week, I couldn't resist. And I called Sarah and I said, okay, I'm hanging in there. It's like crickets, nothing, silence. And she goes, I told you. And I said, I know, but I just wanted to report. I'm just kind of pacing around my house. I don't know what to do with myself. She goes, that's all to be expected. But then the most wonderful thing happened. As Sarah was coming to LA anyway, because she's based in New York, she landed and texted me from her phone that, like, she said, like, my phone's blowing up. There's all this. I told you they take time to read the book. So there was a lot of excitement, and an offer from Little Brown had come in that day. It was a Friday of that week, or maybe it was the next week. I don't remember, but it was like, suddenly it went from silence to, this is a real offer. And it was such a good feedback from them. They really loved the book. I mean, for me, the real thing that I was hoping for was that connection with an editor. And I didn't even know that's how it works. It's the editors that are sent the book to, and if they want to work on the book, they're the ones who make the pitch to buy it, and so it was it was a very exciting day. And my two author friends who we all live very close to each other. My friend Margaret Stoll, who was the one who got the book to Sarah Burns to begin with, and my other dear friend Helen Fielding, who wrote Bridget Jones, all the Bridget Jones novels that we all love and adore. And they both came over. I don't drink, but they brought champagne, and they brought fizzy, something for me. And that night I just made the decision. I could tell Little Brown were so invested in the story, and they loved the book. And I was like, let's do this thing.
I love it. I love that story so much. So, I pulled out my jean jacket here because this is one of my favorite things. There's a band called the Rock Bottom Remainders. And it's King and Amy Tan and Dave Barry and all of these authors that also play instruments. And I'm thinking, you might need to figure out a way to get into that band now.
It's so interesting that you say that, because who used to rehearse where the Bangles rehearsed in LA? Stephen King. The great Stephen King.
Yes, he's part of this band. This is his.
Is he in that band too?
Yeah, it's the Rock Bottom Remainders. He's part of this whole.
I didn't put the name together.
Yeah.
So there is this amazing connection between musicians, I think.
Yes.
And novelists.
I do too. So I'm just putting it out there in the universe that I feel they could use, some fresh voices there.
am. I'm
And
ready.
I need to know if people would like a signed copy of your book, because nothing makes a better gift in my mind. All of these books behind me, those are all my signed copies. Is there a bookstore that they could order signed copies from?
There are some, off the top of my head, I know I signed many books for bookstores. It depends where people are located.
So if they kind of follow you on your tour and see where you've been in person,
yes.
they can call those stores?
Yes, and I will ask Little Brown if they, maybe we could figure out, they could advise, because I would love to get the book into hands of readers that want to read it, because I just was just so blissful writing the book, and the feedback and your feedback has been so marvelous. So I want to continue these conversations.
Yes, and we do. So A Mighty Blaze has a bookshop.org. So bookshop.org is, we talked a little earlier before we were live about alternatives to the big A. And one of them is bookshop.org, which supports indie booksellers.
Fantastic.
And has, wonderful, great deals, and you get your books very quickly. So you can go to the A Mighty Blaze stall on bookshop.org and order your copy there. And is there an audiobook?
Yes.
Excellent. So audiobooks, go ahead.
No, because we had so many British voices in the book.
Yes.
And I didn't have enough time to kind of have someone coach me through that. I had this dream of the reader of the audiobook of Jane Eyre that I studied, a wonderful British actress named Juliet Stevenson. She reads every British voice, in the book. And when I was writing it, I didn't even realize how many varied British characters there were, and with all these incredible accents she's done. It's a feat. So it's currently on audible.com, but it might be on Libro.
It will be, so you can get it on Libro then. If it's out there, you can get it on Libro.fm. So for everybody watching, Libro.fm is the indie bookstore alternative. Your credits never expire. You can listen across devices.
Yes.
And you get recommendations from booksellers such as myself. And now I do want to we've got some great questions from audience members.
Great.
So Lisa Hemming wants to know, have you given any thought to writing a sequel or novella so they can find it?
Well, I just this week have been marinating, I like to say, on something just along those lines. Absolutely. I'm hearing a lot of chatter in here, characters talking. So I think that as soon as I can, I've already started collecting all these ideas. So yes, I am eager to get going on the next book.
Excellent. And Susan Mayfield wonders, where do you like to get away to write?
Well, I actually love writing at my little card table at home, but I have written in hotel rooms, definitely. But mostly I like being in my pajamas. I'll admit I can wear my pajamas all day and writing at home. I like having my coffee maker right there. The coffee maker, I have my little special coffee cup. It's small. It's just the right amount of coffee, and excuse to have many cups, because 2 of these equal a big mug of coffee. So coffee fuels it gives me a lot of energy and excitement when I'm writing. But I have written in other places. Again, hotel rooms mostly would have been the other places. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. And I love this one. Ethan says, your mom, Tamar Hoffs, is an author as well, and she wrote a book called The Liberated Mother Goose. And I'm wondering whether you got any tips from her while writing that you could share.
Well, you know what? My mom and dad are both inspirations. My dad's 90 now. My mom's 88. And they're still going strong. But my mom, started out as a painter, a sculptor. She's a filmmaker. She wrote the Liberated Mother Goose book, which is very sassy. And I ended up getting some copies not long ago. There's still a few on Amazon. Which she illustrated herself. My mom's book collection, I've inherited a lot of it. I guess back to the question, was it about inspiration?
Did she give you any tips?
Tips. I think just growing up in that household was like an endless amount of tips. But she didn't really, not per se. I really studied other books. I've never taken a writing class. I'm just a consumer of storytelling, whether it's binging through the new season of Succession or, watching those Inspector Morse shows from England, or binging old movies on the Criterion Collection. I learn from other sources, and they're everywhere. I mean, I can go to my own bookshelf and just pull out a book that I inherited from my mom's collection. And, you can just open to a random page and there's something there you're going to learn from. One beautiful sentence can make my day in a book. And sometimes I literally do this exercise where I'll go to my bookshelves and I'll just pull something out. And I kept a lot of books around my writing card table. I mean, sometimes I would just look at the books and I'd revisit. I reread The Great Gatsby recently. I reread The Sun Also Rises. I mean, I'm always returning to great books.
Yes. I love that. And I love the fact that your mom was obviously an amazing role model to just follow your passion no matter what it is, never to say, oh, I'm a this, so I can't be a that. I love that. I love everything about it.
I thank you for saying that. I have this thing that now that I'm 64 and I'm not, ashamed of my age. I'm very happy to be here doing what I'm doing and having these great opportunities to make art. But I in reflecting back to my teenage self, for example, or my college self, or just out of college, when, I had to figure out what will my job be. I kind of just gave myself permission to dare to want to start a band. Like so much was happening. There was such a vibrant indie scene that maybe my timing, I got lucky there, but it's now too. I wrote my book on spec. I've always kind of just thrown myself in and studied, with music. I just studied what it was about songs that I loved. Why do I like that song? Because it makes me feel something, because the melody is gorgeous, because this, that, or the other. And the same was true for writing a novel. I didn't take a class. I just would return to books that I loved. And I would look at the prose. I would look at the way sentences were constructed, or I would look at the arc of the story, or why does this story make me cry every time I get to this part? Why does it move me so? And those were things that all kind of were part of this storm of creativity that happened, right when people are kind of unwinding from wanting to do this kind of work. They're kind of like, oh, I did the Bangles. I did this. I did that. Right. For me, I'm just starting. This journey of novel writing and fiction writing has just begun. Honestly, I'm addicted to it now.
I'm glad to hear that, because I'm addicted to your writing. So I'm going to need more. And
I want to do more.
If this was a movie, who would be your short list? Steven Siegel wants to know, to play Jane. And then Lisa's wondering who you could see playing Tom. Do you have people in your head?
Not Jane is very hard for me to think about casting for. I know that I want someone who has a beautiful singing voice and also loves to dance, because I studied ballet and jazz dance and stuff. So I made Jane someone who's really good, loves dance, and you know, I would want to cast someone with, you know, whose voice I thought would suit the kind of singing that I picture the character doing. But there's probably so many wonderful young, late 20s or early 30s. Jane, the character we find her, she's 33, but there's someone out there. And then in terms of Tom casting, I don't know. It's so hard. I have like little mood boards on my computer. Sometimes when I would be writing the characters, I would look at the mood board and look at a face. Interestingly, I had a picture of Michael Fassbender. His Mr. Rochester was so good in the Jane Eyre feature film that came out in 2011. But I just like, sometimes it's just like to describe the color of eye color or the shape of a face. But Sam Claflin is pretty cool. I was watching movies with him before Daisy Jones and the Six. He's been in a lot of movies that if you're like me and you watch a lot of British stuff, then you would know Sam Claflin even before Daisy and the Six.
Love it. Love it. Ethan wonders, now that you're a published author, congratulations, by the way, which album or song would you recommend who hasn't heard your music but discovered you because of your book, which we hope lots of people will?
Yeah. Oh, that's really hard. Well, in some ways, Eternal Flame is a very special song for me. It was a very special time writing that song. And I'm so thrilled that through the decades, post the sort of 80s period of the Bangles, that song has just grown to become kind of a song about love that's endured, where people play it. I get all these lovely notes from people that they played it at a wedding or at a very meaningful moment in their lives. So I am quite proud of that song. And I would say that's the one that came into my head.
I love that answer. Absolutely. So we've talked about that you are going to just keep on writing, keep on writing.
Yeah.
My last question for you is there something you've read recently or are currently reading that you're really excited about?
Oh my God, I always draw a blank the minute this comes. So because I am reading several things at the same time. So let's see what.
I always have to pull up my Instagram.
Oh, I know. This is what it was. And I've been so busy in the last 2 weeks. I like to read, you know, every day. And I always read before I go to bed, but I've been on a Truman Capote kick. And I read, I wasn't familiar with the fact that he wrote Breakfast at Tiffany's. I wasn't aware of that till very, very recently. So I read the novella. And it was so gorgeously written. I mean, you think of Truman Capote as kind of like a persona, and you forget that he's a brilliant novelist. But I finally started, I just started it, so I can't, you know, go too deep into it, except to say the writing is extraordinary. I started reading In Cold Blood because I am a big crime junkie, mysteries, crimes, you know, thrillers.
Yeah.
So, and noir, you know, growing up in LA, there's always this sort of idea that like detective noir was set here, but I like, you know, all kinds of dark crime stories. You wouldn't expect it from me, being in a pop band and writing a rom-com. Some people are calling it a rom-com or a love story. But so his writing is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an LA noir book coming out in June called Maevefly by
I'm writing this.
CJ Lead, and it is
Wait,
dark.
who wrote it?
CJ Lead, Leede, and it's Maevefly, Maeve Fly. The cover is crazy. It's coming out in June. Very dark noir.
Wow, I can't wait.
Set in LA. You know, you being you could probably reach out to a few people and get yourself an early copy.
Oh, maybe. Who's publishing it? Do you know? It's okay.
It's Tor. I'm looking over on my shelf. It's Tor Nightfire, I think. TOR.
Okay.
So check that out, and then if you make it through it and you find it intriguing, let me know.
I will.
I loved it.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna get it.
Susanna, I can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been a fascinating discussion around this. Absolutely, I keep getting a glare on this book. Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, it's a rom-com, but I don't want anybody to think that it's a light, fluffy beach read rom-com-y. It's so much more than that. I loved everything about this. It's one of those books that all I have to do is see the cover, and I'm brought back into the pages with a smile on my face because it is so well written and so well done. And I hope everybody watching will grab a copy. Great book club book because it's just there's a lot of fun stuff to discuss here. And I love talking to you about it. So thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, again, I would ask that you jump over to A Mighty Blaze's website, subscribe to our newsletter, like us, subscribe, follow us on all the social media platforms so you never miss an event like this. And if you did miss any part of this, this interview will live forever on the A Mighty Blaze YouTube page, so you can find it there. And I hope you'll join us again sometime. And Susanna, I hope you'll come back and let me talk to you when your next book comes out.
Thank you. It was such a treat and such a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Bye.